It is now 6:30 p.m. and I would like to call to order the May 17th, 2021 study session of the Board of Trustees of the Aldine Independent School District. Let the minutes reflect that all board members are present, with Mr. Bates and Ms. Avalos being virtual. We also have guests viewing our meeting tonight. We'll start our meeting with a report of the administrative staff. Dr. Goffney, please.
Mr. President, Board of Trustees, on my agenda, we have two items, and one of them is definitely the pleasure of the board as we look at the professional development opportunities that we have for this summer. Just a reminder that Summer Leadership Institute, let's give, if everybody was present, I'd say really excited about being able to attend in person. I've heard from my colleagues across the state, and they're pretty jealous of us because they were looking forward to this team building opportunity with their boards. And so excited about being able to attend in person. So thank you to Yolanda for making sure we were all registered in time so that we could be considered. However, there are some considerations. One includes travel. As you all know, during at the end of I think my first year, beginning of the second year, we purchased some utility vehicles for professional development. So that's an option, and we have two of those, but we recognize that everything has to fit in order for it to work. And of course, it's not required, but it's certainly an option. And so if anyone is willing to drive those, you're certainly more than welcome to. And then, of course, there's another consideration. The post-legislative session is June 19th. And so if you're interested in attending it, Yolanda needs to know so she can get you all registered. So again, it's all the pleasure of the board. Questions about the SLI?
Board, are there any questions?
Okay.
Board, are there any questions? I'd like to note that I would like to attend the post-legislative conference as well.
In the post-legislative conference or session is that Saturday, and Yolanda, you'll send out.
Yes, I'll send an email.
Okay. The next opportunity we have for learning this summer is NSBA, the Equity Online Symposium. It's July 13th and 14th. In addition to providing you all the link, there's also some information that's in the agenda packet, but you can see the different sessions that are going to be covered, and that's July 13th and 14th, and it's entirely online. And so if you're interested in attending that, please also let Yolanda know as well. And last but certainly not least, Lone Star Governance. We have some loose ends we need to tie, and very proud of the work that we've done thus far, but COVID kind of hit, and we haven't been able to kind of come back together and finish the piece. And talking to Patricia, and of course, Kay has been working to kind of pull everything together to make sure everything's updated in policy and looking at our board operating procedures. She said it probably about 6 hours of work. And I was sharing with Kay earlier that one thing that we haven't been able to do, and part of it is because of COVID and others because this busyness of our schedules, is to have a board retreat. And so she and I kind of talked about that possibility, and she alluded to the fact that that was a common practice in the past. And so if we could have a board retreat and we could put some of this in, complete this, as well as think about how we can include like some of my direct reports and talking about some of the big rocks as we're moving forward, but having in a retreat style setting that's outside of this boardroom, outside of the district. And that's a common practice in other districts.
Yeah, I have no objection to the meeting. I don't know. I'm not necessarily interested in going for the expense.
No. And the thing was, it's about just going to somewhere outside of this boardroom is the key, and just being in another area. I think when we did our original Lone Star Governance, we did it out in the
That other
building here. So it would definitely, we have BAM, we have
The other buildings. in
other
the
buildings,
district.
just
Okay,
other
okay.
places where we can make it more of a retreat
Okay,
style
okay,
as
okay.
opposed to
Yes.
here we come to kind of do the
Yes,
work.
yes. That's fine.
And we thought if we could do an evening and a day, so it's some intense time together, but yet we can get some critical work done as we begin the new year.
It's definitely necessary, and I guess we just have to work on the calendars to get it done and stay committed to those dates once we say that we're going to do them.
I
So
like the idea, this is Connie, I like the idea of being able to step away from here and dedicate ourselves. I'd like to see with my committee of Dr. Booker, myself, and Mr. Bates. We worked hard to do the board operating procedures, and I'd like to see that finalized and as well as finish up our training. So it's really a good idea.
And I think we set it far enough out and commit to those dates, and I think we can make it happen in a day and a half, as opposed to, I think our initial one, I never forget, was around Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, and we did 3 evenings in a whole day back to back, and you all committed to that. So I don't think it's anything that intensive, but I would like to make it twofold: finish up the Lone Star governance work, and then visioning towards moving forward. So we'll work on some dates far enough out. July, but before school starts for sure. Okay, so Kay and Yolanda, you'll work with Patricia to see when it's her availability, and then we can look at, I know we'll be busy with PD, so we'll make sure that the board can get one of the rooms in our district, either at BAM or somewhere, and we'll make it really nice. So thank you all for that. And don't forget.
Does that mean that the scheduled activity for Thursday of graduations, was there not a temporary?
I thought that we could use that time, either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday of graduation, but everyone had a conflict. We couldn't
Okay,
get 100%
okay, just
committed.
check.
So you have that time back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr.
Well, thank
Gaffney
you.
also had a note in my calendar about the 24th and 25th, so that's off.
What was the 20?
I had Lone Star Governance on
Yes, ma'am. We
Pencil.
couldn't get everyone there. So
Okay.
those dates are free now as well. And so we're going to start looking for a date July, early August. Okay, so that includes our professional development for the board. The other item, which will be a short report, but I thought it was, instead of trying to have each team member talk about it as it related to their departments, we wanted to talk about it from the concept of finish strong and starting strong. So how we're going to finish this school year and start next school year, and the things that are top of mind. Just a reminder that some of the things that we talked about as far as return to learn are still top of mind, including all of our core beliefs, including the one that we're going to go as fast as we can, but as slow as we must. And of course, the other popular one is we're going to prioritize safety without sacrificing learning. So as we look at that, and we actually have, there's so many different things, so many moving parts, and the news is continuing to give us different information. I had a mentor who said, if you have good information, you can make good decisions. And so we're trying and working really fervently to make sure that we can make good decisions for the students we serve, and of course for our staff. And so we just have a few slides, and we want to give you a few updates, and we'll begin with Dr. Rohde.
Good evening, Mr. Shanklin, Dr. Gaffney, members of the board. I'm Katie Rohde, and I will be sharing with you information regarding our Finish Strong. As you can see, and this should look very familiar to you all because we've shared this in September, but our final report to you all is, as of last Friday, we are at 62% of our total students back on campus. And I want to share that you may have heard May 3rd was our 9th first day of school this school year. It actually, I was corrected by Mr. Lindemann or someone that said it's actually the 18th if you were in high school and you were at AB day. But we welcomed back at that last 2 Mondays ago, over 2,400 students back to campus who had been virtual learners. And so that was exciting for many of them. It was truly their first day. They had new outfits and were very excited to be back on campus. So we are looking much stronger as it relates to the number of our face-to-face learners, and we're looking forward to welcoming even more back. You can go on. So I just want to share with you, last month I talked to you about our learning academies that we had started this spring. We have focused on our elementary and middle school when it comes to our acceleration. As you know, we've shared that many of our students at the beginning of the year were struggling with their grades, with turning in assignments, et cetera. And so I just want to share with you some updated information as it relates to our Acceleration Academies. Again, these are self-paced, and the assignments and lessons are available for our students in reading and math at the elementary level, and then in each of the core content areas at the middle school level. And what we have seen right now is at our middle school spring acceleration, we had over 4,000 students in our 6th through 8th grade taking advantage of this with 9,000 courses assigned. As of now, we have 1,700 courses that were completed, and they're still working on them. And so we know that this is helping our students to recoup their grades, their learning, et cetera, from the beginning of the year. In elementary school, which we had a 4-week acceleration that just ended last Friday, we had, and again, this was for 1st through 5th grade, nearly 27,000 mathematics lessons completed, as well as 36,000 reading lessons in Freckle in just 4 weeks. Freckle is an online platform that we used for our elementary students. It is tied to Renaissance, which is what we're using for our universal screener. And the teachers, the students have really jumped on this, and it has been a way for our students not to have to wait till summer school or other things to recoup their learning. And just so you know, we are going to be reviewing this data once middle school is all in, because we don't want to wait until March, April, or May next year. I think we found some really good systems, and we can replicate those much sooner next year so that students are recouping this learning almost in time for next year. If you can go to the next slide. So just to share with you all, again, if you can believe it, next week is graduation ceremonies. Next week is the last day of school, is next Thursday. It is also our first graduation ceremonies. We are doing 3 a day. I will be sharing with you all on Friday. I will send it to Yolanda, but as part of board communication, just an itinerary of what to expect, when to arrive, where you'll park, et cetera. But I do want to let you know that we have secured air conditioning for the stage.
Ms.
So
Avalos hear that?
from what I am hearing, we will be chilly.
Thank
Um,
God, thank God. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus.
Each of, as you can see, there is 3 per day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then our rain date, which we're going to get all the rain out this week. We will not need it for next week, but we should be all set to celebrate our seniors next week. And just to update you as far as our summer learning experiences, you see in front of you the flyers for our primary elementary, our middle school, as well as our 9th and high school bridges opportunities. And again, this is going to be a summer filled with engaging academic content and courses. Our students are going to not only be able to regain credit and be able to, be promoted to the next grade, but also earn initial credit. For our high school students, there will be TSI, SAT camp, as well as real world learning, college and career opportunities for our students in the summer. And so this has gone out to most of our students and our site coordinators at each of our locations. So we are cohorting our primary and elementary. It will not be on every campus. We will be at specific campuses throughout the district, but our middle and high schools will be at every single campus. And it should be an exciting opportunity for our students, again, to regain some of the learning, but also to have an enriching opportunities this summer.
I'll jump in here and just tell you, Katie mentioned our Finish Strong plans. We are also in the midst of planning for starting strong. That's going to be our theme for next year. If you remember, it was return to learn. We are starting strong. And to plan for that, we are reviewing all of our Aldine ISD specific COVID protocols. We spent last summer ensuring that the protocols in our district were aligned for our needs for our community. As Dr. Goffney mentioned, we'll go as fast as we can and as slow as we must, but it was always geared to what was happening in Aldine. We're continuing to work with organizations, community organizations, healthcare organizations, to provide access to vaccines for our staff as well as our students. Most recently, we have established some relationships with 2 organizations to ensure we're able to respond to the CDC and FDA's approval of 12 and up for the vaccine. We are also we're gathering feedback from stakeholders through surveys and focus groups and feedback sessions so that we know kind of the temperament and what they can handle or what they'd like to see for next year. That is being done in a variety of different ways, whether it's small sessions when we're talking to our teachers of the year, or even through our family and community engagement office when they're talking to parent advisory groups. And then lastly, what we've always done this entire time is monitor the local conditions and also report out where our district and community is landing in terms of COVID. As a reminder, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, although probably using the lowercase p instead of the uppercase p, but still a pandemic, and we still continue to see COVID happening. However, the conditions are improving, and we are continuing to adjust so that people understand that what the district will do moving forward.
I want to thank you, Ms. Reed, for that update. And I was going to suggest to everybody, please state your name for the record so that we keep a clean record. Thank you.
President Shanklin, Tamika Alfred Stevens. As Ms. Reed just said, prepare to finish strong and start strong, we are looking at how we can utilize our ESSER 3 funding to help lift up our learning recovery efforts. As you all know, the allocations were released earlier this month, and the actual application opened last week. Aldine has been allocated $235 million in ESSER 3 funding, and we have until the 2024 school year to utilize those funds. So planning and discussions are underway regarding how we can effectively use those funds to improve student outcomes. We are currently in the process of preparing to engage different stakeholder groups to get feedback on the 5 target areas you can see there that we have identified that we would like to focus our supports around. As you can see, targeted academic supports, social and emotional and student engagement, staffing and talent, technology supports, and facilities and operational needs, which are all allowable under ESSER 3, but they are also targets that we were already prioritizing through our strategic plan. So there is some alignment there that we are happy about, but at the same time, making certain that we leverage these funds to accelerate the learning of our students so that they can recover any learning that has occurred throughout this pandemic. As we move forward, the team is going to give a little bit more information about some of the different buckets that we will plan to use our ESSER dollars for.
Good evening, President Shanklin, board members. This is Todd Davis. I'd like to give you a quick overview of how we're leveraging our ESSER funds to target academic support for our students. The first piece of information there, though, I'd like to pass quickly to Adrian Bustillos to talk about our extended year opportunities.
Great, thank you, board members. Adrian Bustillos. The extended school year, as we know, we approved the additional day school year at 2 campuses at Vines and Irmo schools. So part of this funds is that with the House Bill 3 is giving us 50% of the funds, and the additional half would come from the district. And now this is the perfect time to use the ESSER dollars to help cover the cost of the other half moving forward. So that'd be for Vines and Irmo to help with that program.
In addition to that, you can see that we are also targeting increased college readiness and success strategies, looking at using our ESSER funds to expand our opportunities for dual credit, for through on-ramps, and also looking at building out pathways for SAT, ACT, and TSI preparation for our students. Personalized summer remediation and enrichment, as Dr. Rhodey mentioned already, our summer experience programming that we are preparing, in addition to looking at possibly a jumpstart opportunities for our students to start the year, especially for our very youngest students. Dr. Rhodey also mentioned our learning recovery academies that we have in place right now we're seeing some great success in these academies, and we're going to be analyzing the tenets of those programs and looking at what we could do to pull those experiences forward into next school year to leverage that same type of support for our students to provide intervention and remediation opportunities, in addition to looking at every single minute of the day, whether it be before school, after school, and Saturday, to provide intervention and remediation support for our students. And finally, instructional materials and resources. Of course, Tier 1 instruction is our most targeted academic support, making sure that that is of the highest quality for our students. We will continue to expand our opportunities for adopting high quality instructional materials, as you have heard. In addition to that, we are exploring ways to improve our intervention supports and structures. We are revising, we're transforming our response to intervention practices in Aldine, as well as looking at the academic supports that we provide in both Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction. And we're very pleased to say that the changes to the resources are very much aligned to our high quality instructional materials. And finally, we are partnering with multiple organizations to provide tutoring assistance for our students throughout the day. So not only leveraging our own human capital, but looking at outside of Aldine to make sure we can pull in as many resources as possible to support our students.
This is Katie Rhodey again, and I am,
Before you go on,
Yes.
remember, we wanted to get feedback for each one.
Oh, certainly. Were there any questions, board members?
Board,
Yes.
Dr. Garcia.
Viola Garcia. Yes. Dr. Davis. So the amount that I see here is a pretty hefty amount, $96 million. I wonder, are we going to get additional information? Because it's pretty close to a school district budget.
Yes, that is quite a large amount.
That's a whole budget in and of itself.
And for the purposes of today, yes, we did give you broad kind of general buckets of the work. And as we move forward, then absolutely we will be giving more details on how this.
Do you have a sense? So certainly you came up with that number in some manner. So what were the bigger, larger categories? I see all of the bulleted items and you've gone through each of those.
So
But that's 96 million is a good chunk of money.
So in large part, this is providing funding to pay human capital for all the extended learning opportunities that we are providing. Additional resources, like I mentioned, around intervention, the programming that we are hoping to adopt are also very sizable purchases. And I think Dr. Alfred Stevens, is there anything else that you'd want to add to that?
Yes, I'd like to add that, remember that the 96 million is not in a single year. It's projected to be across those 3 years. And as Dr. Davis was saying, this is a broad bucket overview. We've had multiple discussions of how much is it going to cost for those acceleration academies. We're getting some benchmark data now because we've already started some of that acceleration and we're monitoring those expenses so that we can forecast what that's going to be over the next 3 years. Instructional materials and resources. So one of the tenets, as you heard us describe, of these funds is to make sure we're using high quality instructional materials. And also when we think about high dosage tutoring and intensive tutoring, making certain that those class sizes, not necessarily class sizes, but maybe those student groups are as small as possible so that we can intervene directly with kids. So human capital and utilizing contracted services to support that is where we're looking at the largest buckets. Dr. Garcia, to speak directly to your question, and we did take off some of the numbers that we had there preliminarily because we wanted to make certain we got good quotes and good information before we brought it forward. So this is just the first or maybe a second pass, because I believe I shared this last month, but this is a second draft, if you will, of how we are planning to utilize these dollars. And as we get the feedback from the different stakeholder groups, it'll give us an opportunity to gauge to see if we are planning in the right way. And so these numbers these big buckets there will be adjustments along the way. Am I answering your question?
Yes, so for the next 2 years then, I see the tutoring, of course, and I understand that those groups would need to be small, but are we adjusting in any way the pupil teacher ratios for any of those grade levels?
Yeah, so there will be some adjustments as well that we'll speak to in another section under targeted supports.
Okay,
And we'll go into that a little bit more.
okay.
Chair recognizes Dr. Booker.
I had a question concerning the academies. How many students for the elementary? I know we have about 4,000 for secondary.
Yeah, I believe, I don't know if there's a SAS that can help me. I did have that and I can't recall. I apologize. I will try to get that information to you.
Okay. And the summer experience, is that going to be in person for the
Yes,
students?
ma'am. Yes, that will be face to face.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And keep in mind too, for our summer experience, we went up on our hourly rate so that we could attract those highly effective staff members. We didn't do like some surroundings, they almost doubled it, but we did go up significantly enough that we could attract some good teachers to provide it great instruction for our kiddos. In addition, I think you talked about it, but these extra funds are going to allow us to do some things we needed to do. He spoke to revamping RTI. In the past, RTIs, you've talked about it quite lengthy at every meeting, but we've changed, gone a different direction with the leader. And even if with 82 campuses, we're going to now have a person who's responsible for RTI. And in the past, it was just a half of a personnel unit, and it wasn't to the quality that we're going to be able to bring it to now. And so anytime it's the personnel pieces, so these are things that we already needed to do. So the things you're going to hear are not going to be new. Dr. Garcia, one of the things we said, we're not going to throw everything up against the wall and see what sticks, but kind of align everything with our strategic priorities and to take care of some of those things we've needed to do for some time. But the RTI process, I'm really getting excited about, and it's timely in response to COVID, but also it's something that an opportunity for us, because years ago, a position was cut because of the challenges at that time. And so this is give us some opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and then of course, as we're building out adding that position back to the campuses, we want to make sure that we're using that time effectively. So there will be a great deal of training and support for our RTI teachers that will be ongoing throughout the year. Our RTI transformation is really looking at leveraging multiple points of data and making the correct decisions in placement for our students. And so we also know that in one of our challenges or missed opportunities in the past is that we didn't have structured academic support during that time. For our teachers to now know that we have aligned materials for Tier 2 instruction to support them in addition to training for that. And then as students, need additional support and if they are assigned to a Tier 3, then the RTI teacher steps in and provides that very intensive but structured and aligned support for the Tier 3 instruction. Again, our goal is to make sure that everything is data driven and aligned to the tenets of our instructional frameworks.
Thank you. Mr. Mead?
Steve Mead. Todd, where would the tutoring corps come from? Where would we get the people for doing this training?
Well, I'm going to actually ask Dr. Rohde. She's been the one that they've been contacting and
Right.
coordinating. So.
We are in talks and working with 3 different groups right now, Mr. Mead. One is University of Houston Downtown that has partnered with us before, as well as University of Houston that has a Cougar tutoring program that was, from what I heard, stolen from University of Houston Downtown. But those both are going to be, we're in conversations with them. And finally, there are some other partners that we've worked with in the past that have shown very good results, but we want to make sure that we're being strategic and putting them in the right place. So right now we're talking with 3 different entities that can give us that human capital in our campuses.
But on top of that, I would like to add, though, that to us, it's very important that any of our external partners in tutoring that they have the similar expectations for alignment of the support and training. So even though that they're coming from an outside entity, we are going to be monitoring and supervising the work within our centralized intervention department.
Thank you.
I think the only other question I had, Dr. Goffney, was related to the addition. I think it's good to have us, fill in and use this money to fill in what we have needed in the past. But knowing that this is an infusion of funds that will not continue beyond this period of time, and we have no idea what, the state of of Texas will be, whether the funding for public education at the time will be even what it is this year or was last year. So will these, I'm sure that Human Resources have had a discussion about the information given to these people entering these positions, that they are informed that the positions are because of the infusion of funding, and given the end of that period, if the circumstances in the district are different, then there should not be an expectation of continuation for positions that might have been added through this funding that may not be available at the time at the end of the funding.
Yes, ma'am,
that's-
absolutely. And so they're going on the posting. In addition, the conversations, and I know some of it you'll hear later from the legislative session, they're trying to figure out a way that they can extend the money beyond the 2 years, but that's not something we can lean on. But we've talked about using the ESSER funds to fund things that would have been funded in our regular budget, and then putting more money into fund balance so that we can extend it a longer period of time. Because in the event that this is effective and we are able to evaluate its effectiveness, of course, we will want to continue it. However, we know that we've got to make some other decisions. There's some things that we've got to strategically abandon and stop doing in order to be able to fund it. And to your point about hold harmless and seeing where that's going to go and how many students are going to return and how we're going to recoup some of those students, that's certainly top of mind. But the way we're doing the posting and communicating will be similar to what I think everyone did during our funding, and so on and so forth. So open communication, and to your point, making sure everyone understands that once the money runs out, then we may have to find them a different position.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Is it possible to have
It's Mrs. Sparza speaking.
Connie Esparza? Wanted to ask, could we have, not for approval necessarily, but for just information, the breakdown, because this 96 million is for 3 years, right? And so.
That's over a 3-year period. Tamika
Over a
Alfred Stevens.
3-year period, right? And could you just see, the board could see the breakdown of the allocations?
Yes, that's what I alluded to earlier as we go through the budget planning process, and we have another iteration, and we receive the feedback from all of our different stakeholder groups. This, the third pass or the third draft of this will have more detailed information that speaks to the projected expenses for each of these areas. And you may see some areas, some things added in that are
Right.
not here as of today. So we wanted to make certain first, we got good feedback, good data so we can make informed decisions. And then of course, good projections on the estimates before we brought the itemized pieces forward. But absolutely, Ms. Esparza will make sure that information is included.
When do you anticipate that to be?
The stakeholder feedback starts next week. Actually, our first session is on the 20th. Is that this week? Thursday, I said next week. And then all the way through June 3rd. So I anticipate by the time we have our next board meeting.
Good.
And if it's before then, and we can include it in board communications so that you can have it before that time, but definitely by the next board meeting.
Do we need to consider any of these with our current budget?
So there is some alignment between our current budget and how we are leveraging our ESSER dollars. And I'll go deeper into that conversation at our budget planning workshop that is
Good.
scheduled for tomorrow, because you'll see the alignment and the coordination of both funding sources to
Right.
meet some of these supports that you see here today.
Right, good, thank you, because that's what I was thinking about, because we want to effectively use this money to fill in the gap. We
Absolutely.
will from our own budget. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Latanya Goffney, Superintendent. Ms. Connie, the process requires us to go through all these stakeholder engagement. Like the conversation that we are having now is very good and very rich, and that's why we're walking through each one. And then the feedback that you give this will be updated, and then each feedback, because when we turn in the application, you have to check what kind of how
Feedback
you
we-
engage stakeholders.
Mhm.
And then if the board had an opportunity to provide input. And then, so when is the application due?
The application is actually due July 27th. We will have the application submitted on or before July 1st.
Mhm.
So just like our other federal grant programs, Title I, Title II, and whatnot, we submit those applications annually before the start of the fiscal year so that we're ready to roll July 1st. So we will have it in before then.
And the good thing about that, LaTanya Goffney, Superintendent, the good thing about that is the legislative session will be over because it's like everyone's coming up with these different bills.
Mhm.
They don't trust public school educators and school boards to be able to make good decisions about locally what we need to do for our students. And so the legislative session will be over and we can complete our application with
Application.
confidence that we've done everything we could have done.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sure Mr. Garza will tell us if there's going to be a special session.
Abel told me this was going to be a simple, nice, easy, breezy legislative session.
We can continue.
Mr. Shanklin, I have a question. This is
Yes,
Rose
Ms.
Avalos.
Avalos.
Yes, Dr. Davis, you used a term I'm not familiar with, personalized summer remediation. What exactly is that?
That's a good question. That's woven into our summer experience where our students are getting, based on the review of their data, they're getting intervention and remediation support that is personalized in response to their performance data, their end of year M-class data, end of year Renaissance data. That is all being utilized to make sure that we're providing the just-in-time appropriate support for them. So not just a one-size-fits-all, but trying to actually really narrow down to individual students and their needs. Much
Okay.
like I mentioned in terms of the tier 2 and tier 3 supports.
So will it be for credit?
This will be at the high school level, we will have initial credit and credit recovery opportunities. But what I was really speaking of is that's more of the intensive individualized support that we're providing at the elementary and middle school level. And to be quite honest with you, is in some degree the high school as well, but more intensified at the elementary and middle school levels.
Okay.
And I would like
Thank
to
you.
add, Dr. Alfred Stevens did say that this is just a starting point. This list will be, I'm sure, growing. Everyone on the Corps is involved in multiple collaborative networks of our peers in throughout the state and throughout the nation. And the topic in every single one of those sessions is what are the supports that everyone is providing. And as much as we share our great ideas, that we're gaining great ideas from our peers, and certainly going to grow and learn from that.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I have one more for Dr. Davis, Dr. Todd Davis. We're talking about the spending and our targeted support. Do we have someone that's over RTI? I know we're gonna have RTI in the schools, and I'm happy to
Yes.
hear that, but do we have someone over it? like
We
a
do.
department?
We just, our previous dyslexia program director, Dr. Kim Sinclair, we were able to elevate her to the director of interventions. So we wove in the dyslexia work with our the RTI intervention structures, and she has done a fantastic job. We're really excited about her leadership.
Thank you.
Okay, our next support.
All right, this is Katie Rhodey again, and I'd like to share with you another part of our ESSER planning revolves around our social emotional learning and student engagement. And we know that in order to increase student engagement and address learning recovery, we have to have a safe educational environment by addressing the emotional and behavioral barriers that are there to learning. And so part of our plan is to focus on an expansion of our crisis response teams that will include additional social workers and other trained staff that will respond to trauma and grief support of students and staff, as well as training. We are wanting to be proactive next year and know that, again, 38% of our students have not yet stepped foot on the campus. And so there will be heightened possibly anxiety and other things that we are going to need to be prepared for. Also, additional social emotional learning resources and training to support that. And that is in everything from trauma-informed practices, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, many of the things that we have been doing this year, but we know that we're going to have to expand it. Also, increasing family and community outreach efforts and targeted student enrollment and attendance activities. And so we are putting together plans for how we are going to right away at the beginning of the year, not just knock on doors, but provide wraparound support to students who are not prepared or not wanting to return to the campus. So that is going to be another part of our ESSER support. Does anyone have any questions regarding those?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Rhodey, how did we do this year with SEL? How
did we
as a
do?
district, like, how comfortable are we with what we did this year?
I can say based on the date, and I'll go by data. We just did our last round of Panorama surveys. And I've shared the information from those before. It actually concluded about a week and a half ago, and we surveyed our teachers. I don't have the exact number, but there's a question on there on professional learning and support of SEL. From last year, when we began this, that has increased more than 15%. And it continues to grow. We have 7 social emotional learning specialists that are mobilized on campuses. They are on campuses every week. That is the expectation. So they are assigned to anywhere from about 12 to 13 campuses. We are offering ongoing professional learning. It is last Friday, our school teams, all 82 school teams, participated in a virtual training session that looked at the Panorama data, as well as what are their action steps? How are they going to fold that into their campus improvement plans? And I can say very confidently that almost every day this summer, there will be professional learning that will be offered to our teachers, to our leaders, really live sessions as well as on demand, everything from trauma-informed practices to restorative practices that should be happening on every campus. And then I can go on and on as well about our multi-tier systems of support and looking at our discipline data that we have things that are about to be unveiled on what our guidelines are as it relates to discipline and how we're, again, not going to react, but that we're going to have more things in place on the front end to support our students. So I can keep going because I'm very excited about our SEL department, and also know that it will be, we hope will be expanding with the help of these ESSER funds.
Thanks, Dr. Booker. Thank you, Dr. Rhodey. Board member,
Yes.
Mr. Mead, and then Dr. Garcia.
Yes, sir.
Katie, Steve Mead, I've been meeting with some ladies with the ISD leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the meetings I had with them, it concerned me, and I think I may have mentioned it in the last meeting, was that in our lower grades, in our pre-K and K, we have a group of kids that's 4 times likely to be in more incidents than other kids. What are we doing there on social and emotional learning at that level?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. Mead, because we have recognized that there, at the primary level and the early elementary level, it is not about discipline, it's about teaching students the coping strategies, the calming strategies that they need in order to be successful learners in a classroom. And so much of our efforts have been about ensuring that all of our primary schools are trained in restorative practices. Even though many people think of that as a for older kids, it's about the questions that we ask kids. It's about, there's just a lot of things that we can do to make sure that we're teaching them the skills that are necessary in order to be in the room. Our social emotional learning specialists are on the primary campuses again. But we also have seen, and that was even pre-pandemic, a higher number of our 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that are what we would think in distress and need a lot of support. And so we are, our social emotional learning department has recognized that and has also come to me with some proposals for how we can dedicate more support for those ages. So I hope I answered your question. We recognize that that is true, that our younger students are struggling, and we are hoping to put more supports in those areas.
If
So
I could add to that, just kind of this to answer Dr. Booker and you, Mr. Mead. As someone who's been in Aldine for many, many years, I've seen much transformation in Aldine over the past 2 to 3 years, but the area where I am probably the most excited about and has seen the greatest transformation is in this area of SEL. And I think back in the many years that I've spent in Aldine, and we have not dedicated time strategically to this kind of support. And I can tell you, this is not data like Dr. Rody gave you, but I can give you anecdotal data that when I walk into campuses now, I can truly see and feel a difference in the environment through the approach to social and emotional learning support, not just for our students, but it's for our teachers as well. Teaching our teachers those coping strategies, but then our teachers the ability to interact with a student who is maybe in crisis, who is having a behavior incident, but not in a negative reactive way, but in a very positive way to repair the behavior, not to discipline the behavior. And so, yes, we may be serving students that are 4 times more likely, but I can tell you over the past 2 years, we have provided 4 times, if not more, the support to our teachers and our students. So very excited about the possibility and what's been happening with SEL in Aldine.
Dr. Garcia.
Yes, Viola Garcia. Katie, I was going to follow up on the question, very similar to Mr. Mead's. When we look a little bit later at the data of in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, there really is, the kind of evidence that you're talking about is absolutely important. But one of the pieces that we've looked at for an extended period of years, of course, has been the data that Mr. Mead has referred to. So would you say that the particular strategies, the professional development, and all of those things that you've described a little earlier are not fully implemented to the extent that we would want it to be implemented? And that may be why we're not seeing the results in that particular area as of yet?
Well, our current, the discipline data that has been shared over the past couple of months, and I know I can refer to last month and I believe this month, that although we have, and at the time we had about a little less than 2/3 of our students on campus, we were showing about a 1/10 of where we were last year. And so we are seeing great decreases, not only in the number of incidents, but let me say that what we've started with is the number of days. And so if a student is referred for an infraction, that it's not an automatic 3-day. And so we are working with campus administrators on ensuring that we are not doing an automatic 10-day also after a hearing. So those are all things through our work with our Rethink Discipline Committee, which is the one that we're working collaboratively with 11 other districts in the city. We're looking at our code of conduct and our discipline manual to make sure that those are supporting the practices that we want to happen. And in fact, our discipline manual for next year is not only going to include infractions and how to enter that into eSchool, but it's also going to include what are some of the other strategies that administrators and teachers can do that are non-exclusionary. And that has not been as part of our discipline manual up until this time.
because that was one of the other, that was one of the other questions. So you have a department, 7 specialists or strategists,
Mhm.
but we also have all of the other pieces and components of those people who touch students' lives,
Mhm.
daily, of course, the teachers, but the integration of this knowledge and this work with the counseling staff, with the other support team members in the middle and high schools, with the resource officers, the police officers,
Right.
the title that they have in the schools. So I think, rather than the isolation of these elements, I think it's important. I don't know, the aspects that y'all are using to integrate everybody's involvement in this. So it's not the exclusive role of the SEL specialist.
Absolutely.
But they're integrating their knowledge and information about the family with the counselor at the school, the nurse at the school, the particular specialist who see the students, who have seen the students act out. And I'm just curious to understand that how all of that is integrating, or who's responsible, or who manages the integration among the different divisions of the district for that work.
Well, that's a big question, but currently the SEL specialists are what I refer to as a resource hub.
Mhm.
And so they're there to coach the leaders as well as the teachers on practices. But they may be meeting with counselors, they may be meeting with APs, many others. I will let you know that Dr. Moore has been engaging with Chief Cordova. They have already held a session with our campus resource officers on addressing many of these. Our counselors are also involved. They have been collaborating for the past year and a half to make sure that they're aware of what is happening on the social emotional learning. And also our professional learning plan that we are developing for the summer as well as next year is a 3-prong approach, and one of those prongs is SEL. And so what we want everyone to know is that this is so important. It's right up there with the instructional framework and content knowledge, that SEL is working in collaboration with that. And so we hope that that touches as many staff members as possible in a coordinated effort.
Yeah, and so the same question here, the sum of 6.6 million, primarily human resources, is the larger cost?
The larger cost will be, yes. And some of that, just so you know, because it says social workers, you're going to hear in a little bit that there'll be an expansion with our communities and schools, which is part of our social worker, group that we've already been partnering with, as well as possibly others that we're going to be adding to ensure that we're responding to all of the needs next year. Yes.
Okay, good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, Javier Villarreal speaking, and board members, excuse me. So as we're working through this, we're asking ourselves, how can we leverage these funds, knowing that they're not continuous and just for a moment in time. And so we've heard it, a number of comments already this evening, to keep in mind that these funds, are temporary. And so please note that as we are talking about adding positions, if that's the case, we know that they will not be able to continue to be funded through ESSERs. And so through attrition and so forth, and we understand we are putting that in the job descriptions and so forth. But knowing that, here is a list of just some recommendations we have in terms of staffing and talent, ranging from, one-time incentive, retention bonus to strategic staffing. And so I really want to focus on the strategic staffing. And so I know at the budget or the budget planning meeting last week? It seems like so long ago. We talked about that. And so part of that was adjusting class size to capture most of our teaching positions that we currently have, to utilize the ESSER funds for that, so that we do not have to lose those positions. And so we are looking at that. We have adjusted class sizes so that we are able to maintain the majority of our teaching positions. And keeping in mind, we didn't want to adjust them so much that we didn't have the capacity in the campuses where we were adding too many teachers, where we wouldn't have a classroom for them, or because, as we know, we struggle with our vacancy list, that we were setting ourselves up to increase the vacancy list. And so we had lots of conversations in HR on what we felt was best and what we could accommodate so that we could adjust the class size and make sure that we are able to recruit and get those teachers. On here as well, partnerships with universities. I know we have the University of Houston downtown listed here. However, we are also in collaboration with Sam Houston State and the University of Houston main campus as well with other ideas. I'm not sure if there's any questions regarding staffing and talent.
Board, any questions? Thank you, Javier.
As it relates to technology supports, as you know, we've had an infusion of multiple devices to come into our system, and we want to make certain that we are, one, maintaining them in the best way possible, but also making certain that we are keeping a laser-like focus on continuing to provide an internal operating system that is not only efficient, but it's user-friendly, and so that we can reduce some of the redundancy and some of the work efforts that we're seeing. And also building our capacity to be able to support and maintain all of the technology systems that we have in place and the ones that we have expanded. So we are wanting to leverage these ESSER dollars to help fill some of those gaps that we have as it relates to ongoing technology supports. Are there any questions about technology supports?
I do have.
The only question that I have, Tamika, is that we're having the same problem at the county. Licensing is just going, I mean, it is going to be a recurring cost. And even after these funds are gone, it is quite possible that we're going to have to budget for that. Can you address that?
Absolutely. So licensing, if I can just give you a live example, when I think about the hotspots. So we are thankful for the hotspots and receiving them in 1 year free with the partnership of the county and Operation Connectivity. But after that expiration period, there's a monthly bill and that we are required to maintain so that we can continue to provide that much needed support to our families that don't have access to connectivity on their own. So what I'll say to your question, Mr. Shanklin, is as we improve other operating systems and strategically abandon some of the methods that we're using, we're going to realize some savings so that we can be able to continue to support the things that we truly need to support. One of the highlights that I shared in board communications the past couple of weeks is the fact that we've been having these demonstrations from different vendors for an upgraded enterprise resource planning system. And just by making that change alone, that's going to, there's an upfront cost, but after that, the savings from reducing some of the other work processes and the other contracts and supports that we have will go away because this system will be able to, it's robust enough to be able to accommodate our needs. So over these next 3 years, it's going to be imperative that we stop doing some things so that we will be in a position where we can continue to maintain the things that we need to maintain. And then the technology team, of course, is looking at all of our systems of support. So there are some tech pieces that we probably no longer need to support because of the age of the product and whatnot. So streamlining those processes so that we only have what we need to be successful.
Thank you. Board, are there any other questions? Mr. Mead?
Dr. Stevens?
Yes, sir.
What will happen next year when all the kids are coming back? What will happen to all the computers that we've already got there in the hotspot? We won't need that much, will we?
Yes, we will. So having your own device is just as important now as it was many years ago. Remember, our goal was to make sure each student had their own device. So it's not just a tool, it's an instructional tool that helps you to the learning to continue regardless of where you are. So those devices, Mr. Mead, will be like a book. Just think about when students need books. Everything you need is here on your device. Students were using their phone as a instructional tool. So now they'll continue to have their laptop as their instructional tool. So it's going to be very necessary. I mean, I'm going to say from now and beyond to make certain that just like our teachers need access to a laptop, our students will continue to need that access as well,
Okay, so based,
even when they're face to face.
I understand. So based on that, just that alone, not having books and now having a computer, that should make our grades go up. That should make our kids do better based on we didn't have them before, but now we have them full-fledged in the district with a hotspot. So hopefully that will help our kid to do better then.
It should help with the infusion of high quality instruction and continuing to provide all those academic supports that we know our students need. So the tool is going to make accessing instructional resources more user-friendly and accessible at any time. But I use the example of a book because, you know, when I was in school, we had a backpack. You put all those books in your backpack, and I had books in my arm as well. Now kids have, you can have a book, or you could have, you know, the online version of the book. So Mr. Mead, if I'm answering your question, this is an instructional tool as well as what you were describing. So all of it will be necessary.
Okay.
Dr. Garcia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shanklin. Do we have the limitation of just the physical technology devices? I see one of the things that I'm sure that you all considered is the professional development for the use of the particular devices and for the ongoing creative, integration of all of the resources that are available to teachers. I know that during that first iteration of the pandemic from March until May of that first period of time, everyone was scrambling to understand what are the teachers' roles and responsibilities in all of this, because for the most part, most were, very few were doing the online classes. And of course, just like for students, there is a level of comfort among the teachers in the use of technology. So I would think that the technology integration would include continuing professional development for those teachers who are probably at different layers of engagement and ease, sense of ease with these programming materials available through technology devices. So, but it's not in here. I don't see professional development of technology integration or technology infusion so I don't know if that's intentional because there's another area.
There is definitely another area,
Okay.
Dr. Garcia, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Because I know, all of us have had a different iteration during our own schooling of what is technology. I'm
Right.
sure that years ago it was the pencil and then the eraser and then, all of the
Yes.
different things. And all of those different things that, the people that were instructing needed to do, the overhead projector and different things. And how did teachers learn to adapt and use the new technologies during that era? And it's no different this time.
You're absolutely right. And to Mr. Mead, your question as well, this is a tool, but this is a tool that can just stand on a shelf if we're not knowing how to truly use it to build our students to higher levels of learning. And one of our biggest fears that we are going to get ahead of is that our teachers will go back to their old practice. Our students will have computers in their backpacks, but not actually using them to accelerate their learning. So we will continue to provide ongoing training and support for teachers to provide blended learning opportunities on a daily basis, but I don't see it as we move forward as a separate training. I see it as training that is embedded within all of our curriculum-based professional learning. In our SEL professional learning, we have a team of digital learning specialists, 20 of them, that are assigned to campuses, but they are also assigned to our program directors, our curriculum writers in the teaching and learning department. And we have a training and support plan that will support to really expand the training and support from beyond the digital learning specialists to everyone who touches professional learning in Aldine. So
does that include the technical knowledge, that someone would need to know about how to upload a video or how to,
yes.
okay.
Yes, absolutely. Now, so we will continue to use our learning management system, Schoology. But again, in order to use the system, the platform well, there are multiple tools that a teacher needs to be adept at in order to really, it's about making the learning come alive through the computer. And so the engaging extensions and softwares, that's a key part of the training that we're providing.
So are those specialists in under your,
They are. So
the
they're
tech-
supervised by Dr. Keela Willery in professional learning and digital learning.
okay, and those are 20 that you said?
Excuse me?
Is that the
There's
number?
20, yes.
So is that sufficient for the need?
We've had, yeah, as a matter of fact, this past week, we had a conversation. Dr. Goffney brought that up. Is that in a sufficient amount? And my first approach is always, we're going to make sure we're leveraging our resources effectively, but we are this is one opportunity where I do think expanding that group and really so that we can, as I said, they're assigned to a program director for teaching and learning as well as campuses, and where we might want to think about separating so they can really get deep in both of those two buckets of support.
Tamika Alfred Stevens, I'd like to also add that with our Dell devices, we received some professional learning and training hours that come with that, the purchase of that product. So for the first 2 years, if I'm remembering correctly, we get direct support from Dell, which includes professional learning. So Dr. Garcia, some of those expenses, have we not had that support on, how to utilize the device effectively and whatnot, could be a part of this, but for the first couple of years, and remember, we just got them, it's included in the service that Dell provides to us. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted, and also to speak to your question regarding the, it's not just limited to hardware, it's hardware and software as far as ESSER 3 allowables or any other technology supports.
So that was really good feedback and confirmation of some of our meetings. And I think it's also important to note, I was going to note it later, and we'll also see it for budget planning. Aldine, this moment is extra, not special, but we have an opportunity to really do some real work, because not only do we have the ESSER dollars, ESSER 3, and we don't know what's going to happen with ESSER 2, but we also benefit greatly from House Bill 3. And we have other special revenue funds, including title funds, that a lot of our training is coming out of. And so when we were looking at ESSER 3, we're trying to think of other ways and other unique things, but I appreciate your questions and your feedback, because it'll help us inform our moving forward.
Right. And Tamika Alfred Stevens, when you said that, that sparked another thought in my head. Remember that we still have our other special revenue funds. And so, which comes with funding guidelines and required spending amounts and whatnot. So we still have programs that we are uplifting in those grants, like our Title I allocation alone is over $30 million. So we have those dollars that we still need to make sure we're planning and effectively utilizing in addition to these dollars. So right now we're speaking specifically to ESSER 3, but know that there are other things that are happening in other funding buckets outside of ESSER 3 to address all of our strategic priorities. Okay. Are there any other questions about technology support?
I do have one question.
Yes, Mr. Mead.
How do we know that our children are proficient in using these? I mean, I know through the years, kids have computers and a lot smarter than me, and I have to be taught all the time by Yolanda. But how do we keep the children proficient and know they're proficient in using the computers that we furnish them?
Sure. So if I can give you a real example, when we were over at, where is Miss Eckert? We were at Eckert a few weeks ago. The commissioner was there, was celebrating the fact that we were one-to-one. And when the students got their device, Mr. Mead, they immediately turned them on and they logged in. And I was so impressed. These are first graders, kindergartners, all the way up to, not kindergartners, first graders all the way up to grade 5, that they were showing us that they knew how to log in, and they were already in Schoology and clever. And I was just so impressed that they were not waiting for permission or waiting on anyone to come and help them log in. They knew their username, they knew their password. So what my point is, when you teach a child how to do something and when they practice it, it becomes a part of everyday life. And you have to remember, these kids are already growing up in this 21st century with technology. So they are far more resilient than some of us who are still trying to figure out how to work our iPhones at times, Mr. Mead. So I think that our teachers are doing a great job of making certain that the device is an instructional tool that's embedded in the learning. It's just not a computer that you turn on to type a paper, but there's so many different ways that you can use this as a learning tool. And so I was just so impressed. I was so tickled also, and they were looking at me like, why is that special? And and it wasn't because I had low expectations, but I was just so impressed that they knew how to get in and do what they had to do. And they were in clever, Dr. Davis, and they were doing all kinds of fun stuff. So they know what to do if you teach them.
And to
Could you
Dr.
sign me up
Alfred
for one of the first grade classes?
Mr. Mead, to her point, Mr. Mead, you're going to feel really bad. Ms. Rodriguez is back there smiling because you go to our primary campus and you see our 3 and 4-year-olds. They can do a QR code. They can go in. Like literally, I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh. And so while there are a lot of lemons that happened because of COVID, COVID forced us to push into a blended learning device oriented opportunity. And so I'm really proud of what our children can do, but I can't wait to take you to a primary campus. You're going to feel really bad. Like,
Sign me up for that class.
Take him to a restaurant.
Okay, and then another focus area that we are looking at is facilities and operational needs. And so some of those operational needs include how can we improve the airflow and the ventilation in our campuses, and recouping some of the district's healthcare cost. The health fund is self-funded, but we've seen an increase in the expenses in our health fund this year. So anytime there's a deficit there, the district has to fill in that gap. And we worked really hard for that fund to become self-sustaining. But during the pandemic, we have realized some losses there. And then any unexpected expenses that come up during the year that sometimes you try to plan for everything, but then when you have, a hard freeze and, pipes burst and things like that, come up. So that 40 million that's noted there, we'll give you a breakdown, but I will tell you, to give you a little context, when we were having some facility assessments done, and we looked at the projected cost if we wanted to just do a comprehensive high school, go through and change do a complete HVAC upgrade, right? Change out all that old stuff, and including the filters and all of that good stuff. That quote came in at 4.2 million, just for some HVAC overhaul at a high school. Now, a high school like MacArthur is huge, but needless to say, some of these projected expenses can be considerable. And so while we want to make certain that the largest bucket of these funds, of course, are learning recovery, but we know that making certain our students are coming to a campus where they feel safe and our staff feel safe, and anything that we can do with these dollars to make sure that there are some opportunities to upgrade and enhance the facility, we want to take an opportunity to do that with these dollars while we have them. So that's where that projected cost is coming from. Are there any questions about facilities and operational needs?
Dr. Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Alfred Stevens, tell a little bit more about the healthcare coverage costs and recouping that. That
Yes.
sounds exciting.
So
It's expensive. I mean, that's an increasing cost every year.
So we have our health fund, Aetna is our healthcare provider. And prior to the pandemic, we made some plan design changes so that the health fund could become self-sufficient. It has been sustaining itself. Since the pandemic, of course, we've seen an increase in emergency visits and things that really drive up the cost of healthcare, which is not uncommon. It's all across the nation, if I can say it that way. So we're seeing about a $5 million deficit as of April 30th was the last time we looked at it on a holistic basis. Last year, we set aside, this year too, each year we've set aside $1 million in our general fund to cover any health fund deficits. And for the past 3 years, we have not had to utilize that $1 million because we've been able to balance that fund with the premiums that are collected from staff members that participate in collaboration with the district's contribution. So this year, Dr. Garcia, we have a gap to fill that's about $5 million. And so we're going to plan for this upcoming year to set aside about $5 to $6 million to fill the health fund deficit. So, and these ESSER funds will allow us to do that instead of us using our general fund dollars to fill that hole.
You can continue.
Okay, that concludes our presentation as it relates to the update on finish strong and start strong.
Thank you. A lot of information. Very, very, very exciting. Anything else, Dr. Goffney?
No, sir, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to Dr. Todd Davis in academics.
Okay, good evening again, President Shanklin and board members. My agenda begins on page 29. I have 3 items under consent. The first 3 items are under consent on my agenda. To begin is asking for your consent for the math curriculum adoption. Last month, Dr. Warford presented to you the work of our math task force, the building of our math vision and framework that led to the recommendation for Eureka Math for kindergarten through 5 and Carnegie Learning Mathematics for grades 6 through Algebra 2. Are there any questions regarding this request?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, the second request is for the adoption, your approval of the adoption of the pre-K curriculum. This year is the cycle for districts to explore new pre-K curriculum adoption. We did have a pre-K curriculum adoption committee, a very extensive committee that reviewed multiple resources that were approved by the state. The curriculum that was recommended is Frog Street. Frog Street is the existing curriculum that we use now. However, it is a much updated and improved version of what we have now. The pre-K curriculum is an integrated curriculum. So this particular adoption covers all content areas for pre-K. The pre-K curriculum is designed to be very thematic. And one of the bonuses that I find in terms of this particular recommendation is that the Frog Street curriculum very much aligns to our literacy curriculum that we have at pre-K, the CKLA, the Amplify product. Are there any questions regarding this request?
Board? I see none.
Okay, the next request is an annual request. Each year, we come to the board to ask for your approval of the TEAC certification, instructional materials allotment and TEAC certification. This is a requirement of the state of Texas that you are certifying that the curriculum that we are utilizing in Aldine ISD is TEACS aligned and is being approved by the state of Texas. Attached to this, you will find the form that we must complete and then submit to the state. And that begins on page 36. So that particular form provides for you all of the curriculum that we utilize right now in Aldine. And then if you scroll further down on that document, it shows you all of the recommended curricula that the state of Texas has outlined. And of course, the materials that we have adopted are all on that list. And so we are asking for your approval of that. Any questions?
Dr. Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Davis, on page 37, I think it is, where there is a summary of all of them.
Yes.
Just explain a little bit more about the locally developed resources related to College Board. What exactly does that mean?
Yes, so right now, in some of the AP courses, there's not a designed curricula. So that we utilize a eclectic approach of bringing in resources to build a locally developed curriculum that is developed by our program directors. But the College Board materials, which is not necessarily a curriculum, are utilized extensively as a support to make sure that we're aligned to the principles of the advanced placement courses. I'm thinking that's what you were asking. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
So the College Board provides a template. I mean, what is it that our the local staff uses that College Board provides?
There's resources, there's recommended scope and sequences. without having it in front of me, I can't tell you exactly, but what we will do is we will use the resources from College Board to build out our own unit plans here within Aldine ISD, scope and sequences, and then daily expectations for teaching and learning throughout the course.
So the College Board assessment resources? Because their focus is assessment.
Yes, so they do, the College Board provides, yes, their assessments, but also they provide some support for preparation toward the assessment, and that we leverage that.
Mm, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Any other
You can
questions?
You can continue.
Okay, thank you. The next item on my agenda is an update of our multilingual task force, and I'd like to invite our Executive Director of Multilingual Services, Grace Delgado, to come and join us. She has a presentation for you this evening. Very excited about the work and the leadership of Ms. Delgado and the multilingual team. When first came into this position 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, however long it was, one of the first tasks that I approached was the adoption of our literacy curriculum literacy materials for the piloting of the materials. And what we found through that process is that our multilingual, in ordering product for our multilingual classrooms, our bilingual classrooms, we had significant variance in how our core classes were structured, and very, very misaligned to what was in place in the district. And as a result of that, we knew that we needed to do a deep dive into our multilingual practices. Our students' learning outcomes were not progressing at the rate that we felt satisfactory. And as a result of that, we knew that we needed to do an internal audit and, again, a real study on best practice and research when it came to bilingual services. So thankfully, Grace Delgado joined the team as our executive director, and under her leadership, she has led a task force, a collective learning group, through a study of best practice that she will share with you today, and then also a recommendation for bilingual programming as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Good evening, President Shanklin and Dr. Goffney and board members. My name is Grace Delgado. I'm the Executive Director of Multilingual Services. And it is with great pleasure that I present to you tonight the overview of the work of the Multilingual Collective Learning and the Aldine ISD's Multilingual Vision Framework. At the center of all the decisions that we make in Aldine ISD are our strategic priorities. We have a responsibility to do as much as we can to ensure that our students have access to more choices and opportunities. And in the multilingual services world, that means ensuring that our ELs have all the support they can have in order to access those choices and opportunities. For this purpose, we created the Multilingual Collective Learning Group to learn together about best practices to support our ELs and to analyze the work that we're doing in Aldine ISD. The goal of the Multilingual Collective Learning Group is to leverage the collective power of this team in order to develop a normed understanding of what excellent linguistic instructional supports look like across Aldine ISD. Once we have developed a common vision and framework for instruction, we will work together to develop a professional learning strategy and make program recommendations to support all stakeholders to enact this vision. Members of the Multilingual Collective Learning include a cross-section of leaders in primary and elementary campuses, including teachers, skill specialists, assistant principals, and principals, and district-level leadership, including literacy coaches, program directors, executive directors, cabinet members, and the district superintendent. This is a timeline of our work that began in January. As you can see here, the plan was for the core team to spend the month of March and April crafting a vision and framework that we can bring back to the larger task force. This work will continue through June. With this vision in place, we will shift to action planning in order to ensure that we have a strong plan for implementing this vision across the district. This is an overview of the topics of each session in the learning series, but first, a very quick recap of where we have been. In January, we looked at our demographics and data in order to center the work we would begin to do to serve the multilingual students in Aldine ISD. We compared the national, state, and Aldine-specific demographics and took a deep dive into historical assessment data for EL students in our district. We noticed significant gaps in achievement when comparing ELs to all students. We then looked at the seminal research conducted by Thomas Collier over a span of 8 years, which studies the 6 programs offered in the United States to multilingual learners and their impact on student achievement. We began analyzing connections between the programming in Aldine ISD in comparison to programming studied for ELs across the nation. In Aldine, the programming that we currently have for our bilingual students is the early exit transitional model, marked by the bright blue line in the middle of the graph. The current program's goals aim to reclassify bilingual students out of this program and into general education as early as 1st grade, making it hard for students to have a solid foundation on their first language and sometimes taking it away from them. The implications of this programming are evident in the low academic achievement scores of our students and at the high school level, when students have to take basic foreign language programs, taking away the opportunity of advanced courses with college credit and the seal of biliteracy. In February, we studied how language is learned and how students of multilingual backgrounds not only acquire, but develop multiple languages. We also discovered the environmental influences of language and the connections that move across languages. In addition, we also explored the dimensions of language and the implications of these dimensions across different content areas. At the beginning of March, we studied the legal rights of students and how current laws are based on the civil rights movement. Our legal responsibilities in Texas are founded in federal law that was created after the civil rights in the 60s, from the Bilingual Education Act to ESSA, which has transferred to the Education Code 29 and Chapter 89 in Texas. At the end of March, we looked at the specific instructional programs offered to ELs in Texas and what each one can offer our students in order to begin drafting our vision. In April, we dove into the specific implementation rubrics that TEA has created to support each program and gather feedback as to specific items we wanted to see in our vision framework. Linked to this slide is the Aldine ISD's multilingual vision and framework. The document was created by a core group of members from the collective and then reviewed by the larger group who provided feedback. You will receive hard copies of the document that will provide more details about this framework and its expectations. Our vision states that Aldine ISD will provide academically rigorous and culturally relevant instruction that accepts, embraces, and respects cultural and linguistic diversity and prepares all students to be effective communicators with the skills and knowledge needed to succeed in a diverse global community. Our goal for multilingual learners is biliteracy. With this vision, we have specific beliefs. In Aldine ISD, we believe in biliteracy development and sheltered instruction practices when teaching all content areas, in educational opportunities that are equitable and representative of the diversity of the district, and that our students' diverse backgrounds and experiences are valuable. All of these beliefs centered in student learning and doing what's best for our multilingual learners. This vision and framework come with a recommendation from the collective. The recommendation is that we transition our early exit bilingual program to a one-way dual language program and create a 5-year rollout plan that explicitly define content and language allocation by grade level in these transitional years. Develop and train monitoring systems to ensure fidelity of implementation at all levels. Create and provide multi-layer professional learning opportunities to target biliteracy, shelter instruction practices, and cultural competence. And continue to evaluate adopted high-quality materials to ensure equity and supplement as needed. By providing our EL students with a one-way dual language program, our goal is to ensure a strong foundation in their language one that will support second language acquisition and development, helping our students become bilingual and biliterate, and opening the door for more choices and opportunities. We strongly believe that this way is the best way to support our multilingual learners in preparation for life beyond Aldine. I would like to close with this quote, as it comes from some of the materials we reviewed together, and it struck a chord in the work that we're recommending here. It is time to stop seeing English proficiency as a prerequisite to success and fully embrace multilingual learners for the journey of learning the real content in school in ways that engage and support all learners. At this time, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And so if I could, before we have questions, if I could just kind of do a quick recap, board members. So thank you, Grace, and the work of the team. So much like we did with literacy and math, we did bring that collective group together to study the best practice and research. And as Grace has shared with you, the result of that work was the development of a vision and framework for bilingual programming in Aldine. And I do have, Grace has walked you through that, and I have hard copies for you. Now that vision and framework now has led us to recommend the movement of our bilingual programming from the one-way early exit to a one-way dual language. That will not supersede what we already have in place for our two-way dual language choice. That will continue to grow and continue to thrive. We do see, though, the adoption of a one-way dual language as being as complementary to that work, and will actually, the two working side by side will help both programs grow and flourish. But I want to emphasize the core of our recommendation is to develop biliteracy in our bilingual students. An early exit model took our students away from developing their first language. It exited them early. And what our goal is, and we know for the choices and opportunities for our students, the responsibility that we have, that we need to provide opportunities for our students to be proficient in both languages. And we know that language development is dependent. Second language development is dependent on leveraging the first language, but not to the extent where we abandon the first language. Our responsibility is to build both in our students. And that I think we all know that in today's society, a student who can read and write in multiple languages has many more opportunities and choices in their life. And I think that is our responsibility to do so, to provide that for them. So are there any questions?
Dr. Garcia?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shanklin. Dr. Davis or Grace, what is the alignment then of the plan and the link to the resources that were shared a little bit earlier in the slides for moving forward with the ESSER funds? Because I think one of the components is the same that we talked about in the efficient or effective use of the technology resources that we have. Obviously, the bigger part of that is the development of the users. And so the big question here is, as you move into a plan, it appeared previously that the staffing resources for the support team in the multilingual department were insufficient to begin with. And so as you move into another phase that is more fully developed and will be integrating these new concepts, what is the plan for the support that the multilingual department will have in those, not only specialists, but in the provision of the staff development necessary for the implementation of this program, which would require specialized training to be provided, I'm assuming, by those limited number of specialists?
So one of the things that I'd like to remind everybody is that our multilingual learners are in every classroom. So they should not only be the responsibility of the multilingual services department. They should be responsibility of all. So part of this collective, as you see, have included members from multiple teams, and that's the work that we're doing together. This is a collaboration between schools and teaching and learning. So we are all lifting together all students. So the training that is coming in a layer way, it's including all program directors for multilingual and content, because these layers of support need to be embedded in our tier 1 instruction and all the supports needed. The curriculum documents are being supported by multilingual services. The curriculum resources, we're working in collaboration. So it's been truly a work of collaboration in order to support all teachers. So the plan is meant to include all levels, all administrators, all instructional specialists, or we have a plan for literacy coaches to leverage that language piece as well, because we know the lift has to be across the district.
And we don't certainly look at it as there was limited resources. We look at it as there was missed opportunity for resources that were existing. As Grace said, we have program directors for every content level. They're not just regular education content program directors. They serve all students. We have skill specialists whom we now call instructional specialists at every campus, multiple, that serve reading and math. That's not reading and math for English speakers only. It's reading and math for all students. And so our professional learning strategy moving forward is to make sure that we're providing the skill set for all of that support to provide support to the teachers for all students. It's not just isolated, like Grace said, it's not isolated to the multilingual department. There's a robust teaching and learning department that will be supporting them.
Okay, so the regular classroom teacher will have the training in sheltered instruction.
Yes.
Absolutely.
For example.
Yes, and there are supplemental resources that are coming to support curriculum and instructional practices that 100% of the staff will have access to. Even if they don't have an EL student in their classroom, they still have access to those resources.
And then the federal funding for the support that your multilingual division will get includes the resources for the inclusion and development of parent engagement.
Absolutely. This
So-
year, we started our classes. We started the collaboration with Lone Star to enhance the opportunities for literacy for our parents and to add layers of instruction. So that program is growing even in the middle of the summer. So we only look to expand our opportunities.
Okay, so you've included in the presentation previous that was shared by Dr. Rohde and Dr. Davis, you've included your needs,
Yes.
the needs of your division
Yes.
for those pieces.
Yeah, we've gone through our budget meetings and we've gone through all of those pieces already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grace, very much. And board members, that concludes my agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. We'll move on to Katie Rohde.
Mr. Shanklin, I had a question.
I'm sorry, we didn't see a hand.
I guess you're not seeing or able to see my hand raised?
No, it doesn't, I'm not on my screen.
Okay. My question is, will this new or shift in instruction affect the compliance part of the program?
Not at all. This is one of the 6 programs that the state has for us. And we're actually using the TEA created rubric to make sure that we are in complete alignment with all requirements from TEA.
Okay. And I know in the past we have looked at exiting or trying to exit students by 3rd grade. Is that going to change with this program? Because you've emphasized that, we will not exit them that quickly. And will they still be monitored by the LPAC?
They will continue to be monitored throughout the programming and after the programming, because we do have that 4-year plan that we have to cover with them as monitored. But under the one-way dual, because of the years that you have to be in the program before reclassifying, nobody will be reclassifying before either the end of 3rd or the end of 4th grade.
Okay. And by reclassifying, do you mean exited?
Exiting, yes, that's the new term.
Okay. But that sounds like what we were doing, isn't it?
No, actually, under the early exit model, we begin exiting kids in first grade.
Oh, well, I agree, that's too soon.
That's too soon, and we've actually have parents that do not want to agree with that
Oh,
decision.
yes, yes. Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Avalos. Any other questions? Dr. Rhodey?
All right. Good evening again, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and members of the board. I have two items for approval starting on page 47. The first one is the approval of a memorandum of understanding with UTMB Health and UT Health for 4 of our schools to participate in a research study. It is using the curriculum. It's actually our social emotional learning curriculum called 4th R. And it will involve 4 of our high schools, Eisenhower, 9th, Victory, and Carver. Are there any questions regarding that approval?
See no hands raised.
Okay, I just wanted a clarification. So it's not really the implementation of a programmatic instruction. It's testing the security of the data collection and retrieval and access and all of those sorts of things. Is
So
that-
and as you see on page 48, it talks about that they will participate in some focus groups
Mhm.
at the end of this semester, teacher interviews for those teachers who are implementing them, as well as completing any tracker sheets that are required.
Mhm.
So we have been utilizing this curriculum this year and believe that it is by far the best approach for promoting youth relationships and healthy nonviolent behaviors with our high school students. And so this will be a partnership with these two that I think will help enhance our SEL practices.
So was it UTMB that brought this
Yes.
to our attention? Because I noticed that 3 board members live in that zip code.
77088, I believe. Yes, ma'am. It was UTMB Health, and then University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so they brought that to the district's attention.
Yes.
To focus on that
And yes,
that
ma'am.
area. Okay. Okay. And is that consistent with our own records of, the records? I know the one year we went to the, I think it was the juvenile delinquent sheriff's department data sources, and the numbers were extremely high for Aldine. And later they confirmed that these were really not students of Aldine, but, people that came in and the crime was committed in our district. But
Okay.
is that consistent? Is the information from UTMB consistent with that sort of data?
Yes, and I'm not aware of what you're
Okay.
talking about.
Okay.
But like I said, this is, we are already implementing the curriculum. And so it is,
Mhm.
and just so you know, it has been at no cost.
Mhm.
So it has been a great help to our high school teachers, and they are implementing it at this time through health and PE.
Okay. Thank you. That was the other question. What are the kids not getting when they're doing
No,
this
ma'am,
curriculum? Okay.
it is through their regular health and
Okay.
PE classes.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other hands raised, Dr. Rhodey.
Okay. And the next one is a approval for a cost of living adjustment for our Head Start Avance partnership. And again, this is just to clarify, it's for a Head Start and early Head Start. As you know, we are a delegate. This funding does not guarantee a cost of living adjustment and only allows for funds to be in place if the board approves a cost of living or a raise for next year. Any questions about that?
Doesn't appear to be.
All right. And I am now going to turn it over to Dr. Charlotte Davis for several other approvals.
Charlotte Davis. Good evening, President Shanklin, board members, Dr. Goffney. My agenda begins on page 102 with 4 items for your consent. 3 of which are annual agreements with Harris County with Harris County Department of Ed. The first on page 103 is for Harris County Department of Ed's High Point to provide educational related services for our students who've been removed from AISD from Aldine and is usually at our own Knippel Education Center that commit an offense that violates the student code of conduct and warrants a disciplined alternative education placement. We're requesting 10 units for 21-22 school year. This is a reduction of the number of slots we requested for this school year. We have 6 students assigned to High Point this school year. Are there any questions? Okay.
No.
The next item begins on page 110, and it is our agreement with Harris County Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. And it provides a continuum of services to students who commit major offenses that mandate placement at Harris County Juvenile Justice Alternative Education Program. We do not have any students currently assigned to JJAEP this year, and there's no financial impact to the district for assignments to JJAEP. Any questions?
No.
The next item begins on page 123, and this is our interlocal agreement with Harris County Department of Ed Fortis Academy, and it's for helping our students who have substance abuse or dependency continue their education in a sober environment. We have our students who have attended Fortis have been successful with drug rehabilitation and have graduated from high school. We had 2 students at Fortis this school year. We are requesting to keep 2 slots for next school year. Any questions? Okay. The next item is on page 130, and it is a service contract with communities and schools. And as our chief of schools, Dr. Rhodey alluded to earlier, we're looking to expand our social workers in the school district. Communities and Schools has been in Aldine since 2005, except during the year we had budget deficits. And being strategic about our student outcomes and retention for graduation, we begin to look at the benefits for our students and families that CIS provide, and believe that having a CIS student support manager at each of our 9th grade campuses would provide us an opportunity to be strategic, help improve our graduation rates with students with post-graduation plans after high school, and overall student academic success. We believe 9th grade is an optimal time to provide intense focus on at-risk students to prepare them for high school with the goal of graduating. Additionally, we had a meeting that was organized by our representative, Armando Wally, that included CIS, CEO and directors, and we discussed the benefits of having CIS in the district. As you know, CIS is a TEA-recognized dropout prevention program, not only in Texas, but they have programs in states across the US as well. CIS staff are trained to look for signs of students getting off track in areas of academics, behavior, and attendance, and work with school staff to prioritize students to support based on the level of need and the eligibility criteria for at-risk students. We believe at the 9th grade level, once students advance to high school, our intervention specialists will continue that work and collaborate with the CIS Student Support Services Manager. So we are asking for approval for 5 additional student support managers at each of our 9th grade campuses. And we have 1 currently, and it would be a total of 6.
That was,
Do you have a question?
Mr. Shanklin, Viola Garcia.
Dr. Garcia?
Yes. Dr. Davis, the Teague Middle School, was it already, I know that when we discontinued the program, it was more extensively employed in the district, and then we reduced that.
Yes, ma'am.
to Nimitz, I believe, but was Teague a part of that? And is that why Teague is the only middle school that is in this plan?
When we brought the CIS back to the district,
Mhm.
we looked at outcomes. We looked at data at our schools and determined at that time that Teague would best benefit for having a CIS, student support manager, based on looking at their discipline data and other data. So we have the one at Teague right now.
So were
Heard.
so this will be a continuation for Teague. In other words, we've already.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
The last item is on page 139, and it's for your information, and it is the monthly discipline report. Questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, this is where, Dr. Rhodey, where I was referring to, when you look at page 140, and you look at April for, yeah, the last column, Mr. Mead, that has all the information. We have SAC and in-school suspension. Those numbers increased. Of course, we understand comparatively speaking to last year, there's would be different numbers because there are less students, but the increase, for example, in the green SAC from 468 in March to 806 in April, in out of school from 209 in March to 303 in April. So that was the question really that I had earlier, referred to those numbers and the
Right.
effect, of the effect of the work that you were just sharing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I saw these numbers, and yes, it is increased for both the events, the SAC, as well as a slight increase for our out-of-school, the out-of-school suspensions. And so we monitor these monthly as well. We have a breakdown by campus, and myself, the school assistant superintendents, as well as our social emotional learning and Dr. Davis are analyzing that. We're also strategically have our SEL specialists are going to some of those schools and seeing what types of supports that they need. Our MTSS teams are being deployed and making sure that they are working. But even if I look at it, the 806, if you look at comparatively, the year before, it was about 4 times that amount for the previous month. So we will continue to monitor those and update those every month.
Doesn't appear to be any other questions. We will, so you're finished, Dr. Davis? Thank you. We can move to Javier.
Yes, good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, Board of Trustees. The Human Resources Agenda starts on page 141. As you can see on the HR agenda, I just have my 4 standard reports that I'm able to answer any questions if there's any. However, before, I'd like to draw your attention to page 144, which expresses our condolences to 3 families of employees who have passed away. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions involving any of the standard reports.
You can continue, Javier.
Okay, that concludes the HR agenda.
Thank you. Dr. Stevens.
Good evening again, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and members of the board. My agenda begins on page 161. And we have several items that we are recommending for your approval this evening on the consent agenda. Items 1 and 2 are our standard requests. There are our ratification of the check registers and also the approval of several bids. Are there any questions about any of the bid items this evening?
No hands are raised.
Items 3 through 11 are a series of, I'm sorry, let me start over. Items 3, 4, and 5 are also standard reports. Those are our requests for contracts and purchases over 50,000, our budget amendment for this period or this month, and also our monthly tax office refunds. Are there any questions about items 3, 4, or 5?
Board? Let me check.
Items 6 through 11 are a series of easements that we are requesting your approval of. And this is in an effort to reduce flood mitigation, or it's in response to flood mitigation and to reduce flooding in different parts of our district. So any work that's being done that obstructs our property will be put back to its original condition. So we're requesting approval to work with these different entities, specifically Harris County, in its efforts to reduce flooding. Are there any questions about any of these requests?
Dr. Stevens?
Yes, sir.
What's the purpose of collecting the soil samples at Odom? What are they looking for?
So again, anytime there's a Halls Bayou, the watershed there's some flood mitigation efforts underway for that particular area. And so there are environmental assessments that have to take place. And a part of those environmental assessments are to come and collect a soil sample. So there's some geotechnical borings and other things like that, tech talk, Mr. Mead, that I've learned a lot about that have to take place. So they have to come and collect the soil sample and then conduct assessments before they can determine the degree to which they can deploy any type of flood mitigation efforts.
Okay. Then they come back and tell you what they found.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are there any questions about items 6 through 11?
Doesn't appear to be.
If there are no questions, I'd like to move on to the informational items, specifically page 279, where we have the, Lexi, can you give the board those orange folders for me, please? Where we have the monthly revenue status and budget analysis. Just wanted to, again, highlight where we are at this point of the year. So as of April 30th, we have expended about 78% of our projected budget. Usually around this time of the year, we would be at about 83%. We've also been working with the team to forecast out what our remaining expenses will be for this school year. And so, of course, today is May 17th. And so we have the rest of this month and then the month of June before we start the physical closeout of the budget fiscal year and the school year. And so with that being said, we anticipate that we are going to not expend about 47 million in our current budget, which means that that amount would roll into our fund balance. And I'll be more specific and detailed about that during our budget conversations that we're going to have on tomorrow during our budget planning session. I've also provided you in the orange folder the second draft of the budget request by departments. Last month, I provided you this document. That was the first draft. Remember, there's several iterations. We're still having conversations about budget planning. In fact, we had a series of meetings last week, so you'll see that some requests have changed since the original budget submission. So you have the original budget request, then you have a column that notes what the budgets were as of May 4th, and then you should see a column that says what the budget requests are as of May 16th. So we are still actively engaged in budget planning and having those discussions. And so we'll get more specifics during our conversation that will take place tomorrow, but wanted you to have this latest and greatest information. So this is the second draft of our ongoing budget. Are there any questions about that document? If you have additional questions, of course, tomorrow we can further discuss if you needed some time to look through it beyond these moments. Also, we've talked a little bit about ESSER 3 planning and what that's going to look like and what areas we're going to be focused on. And ESSER 2, which we do not have the allocation amount yet and how the state will, when or if, not if, when the state will release those funds and the degree to which we will have access to those funds. So as more information becomes available regarding ESSER 3, of course, we'll have a conversation about that. Are there any questions regarding any of the information items on my agenda?
I don't see any hands raised. Dr. Stevens?
Okay. If there are no additional questions at this time, that concludes my part of the agenda.
Thank you. Looking forward to a robust conversation tomorrow.
Thank you.
Mr. Bustillos, Transformation Office.
Great. Good evening, Board President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and board members. My name is Adrian Bustillos, the Chief Transformation Officer. My board items begin on page 305. This is the review of school action fund award amounts up to year to date, and this is an informational item for you all. I want to point out that this information is all dollars won from the Texas Education Agency up to this point, starting from 2019-2020 school year up to the 2021-22 school year. Up to year to date, we've received $4.6 million to support the actions here. We just submitted additional round of grants for implementation for hoping for a total amount of $5.3 million for the 21-23 to the 23 school year moving forward. So with that, as expected, we hope there'll be a grand total to close to $10 million to support this new Office of Transformation and the school actions moving forward. So if you have any questions, I take them at this time.
No questions, Adrian. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Shalia Reed, Communications.
Mr. Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, members of the board, my agenda begins on page 310 and goes through 316. They are the standard items you see each and every month. I do want to point out that tomorrow during our board meeting, we will be celebrating some employees, those who are celebrating at least 30 years in the district. And we will also celebrate those who are at 35 years and 40 years. Those who will be in the building with us are those who have reached 35 and 40. We really like to honor them and celebrate their tenure within the district. Those who are in the 30-year category, we've invited them to stream online, and we'll celebrate them in the same way by listing out their names.
Should have a full house.
It should be a nice group, pending weather.
Pending weather.
Pending weather.
Sure.
I also, before I transition over to Abel Garza, I just want to point out that this month, our media report includes some positive media stories. We're constantly looking for ways to tell the stories of the district. And so just today, I got some great news from from Mike from the team, who mentioned that 4 of the local news stations will follow a story about one of our graduating seniors who told us that after graduation, he will beat cancer, brain cancer, and also go on to University of Houston. It's a great story. He's really excited to tell his journey and talk about how his teachers and the staff at Eisenhower High School really have supported him as he's been able to balance school and his fight. So I'm looking forward to how that plays out in the news. Great story.
It's very moving. If anyone's not familiar with it, it's a wonderful story.
Abel has the pleasure, he will be next. As Dr. Goffney alluded, we heard that this was supposed to be a pretty lame and tame session. However, my cell phone data plan will tell you that Dr. Goffney, Dr. Alfred Stevens, and Abel have sent messages throughout the night as we've watched the testimony, the arguments, everything go into the night, the late night hours into the morning. And this session has turned out to be one that has had several things to follow. So I'll turn it over to Abel to share just a few of the bills we've been following.
Yeah, I don't know who gave you the idea that it was going to be a simple session.
I was about to say, consider the source.
Sources. Abel Garza, board members, my agenda begins on page 320, and I provided a list of bills for y'all to review. But I wanted to talk more specifically about other bills and some of the kind of repercussions of the results of what happened. So, as y'all know, the chairman is in the House is Representative Dutton. His bill to what they call the HISD bill, HB 3270, died on the floor because of a point of order. And so that upset him. So the story goes. And because of that, he pushed forward the Senate bill 1365, which basically is the companion bill, does the same thing. They're saying they're going after HISD, but it's more encompassing. It's for all school districts. And so he pushed that bill forward. And in fact, what he did also, he brought back to life SB 29, which is the UIL bill, which forces student athletes to play on sports teams based on their biological sex instead of their gender identity. And so that bill now is moving forward. The virtual school bill, SB 27, was also considered dead, but then that was revived, thankfully. The word was that teachers groups, some of the organizations that normally are friends with the district were fighting some of these portions of this bill. A lot of amendments have been added to. What you'll notice is a lot of the amendments have been added to these bills from the House side or the Senate side just to get them passed. And so there's not a lot of confidence that those amendments are going to stay there. And so that's something that we're really looking at. So even once both houses pass and they go into conference committee, we still don't know what's going to happen until probably the very end and until the governor signs off on the bill. So SB 27 is dead, but HB 1468 is still alive. So that's now in the Senate, but it has not moved in well over 20 days. So we are waiting to see what's going to happen if that bill will be moving forward. The virtual school bill will be moving forward. We did talk about ESSER funding, and every time I was trying to keep up with some of these bills that were coming up during the discussion, but there is a bill coming up, HB 1525. It's set to be voted on the Senate floor on Wednesday, which seeks to extend, among other things, but it seeks to extend the deadline to spend the funds to 2026. And so some of the amendments have been added to that. So we're waiting to see how the Senate will vote on that on Wednesday. We'll get a better idea on that bill. Additionally, an important bill, Senate Bill 2202 and House Bill 3979 by Ta. This is what they're calling the critical theory bill. It's a very I really don't know how to describe the bill, but it plans on limiting a lot of expression for students. It will curtail discussion, current events. It does a lot of stuff that we probably don't want to do for our students. So there's a contingency going up on Thursday. It's being actually heard in the State Affairs Committee. And we will be going up there to oppose it along with folks from TUC and TSA to oppose that bill, those bills from moving forward. We do have an Aldine staff member that's wanting to go and oppose. She's made some very good arguments, and I think it's something that needs to be heard. So board members, if y'all want to go, we'll be leaving at 5:15 early in the morning. to get there at 9. I know y'all used to waking up that early. We'll be headed to Austin on Thursday. The hearing starts at 9.
At 9.
And if you're trying to travel to Austin to get to the Capitol, you need your vaccination card or a picture of it and your ID, and that gets you right through the door. So again, that's those are the bills that I wanted to kind of bring up to you. You did get a list of other sample bills of other bills that we've been tracking. There's just a lot of bills. There's just a lot of stuff that's out there. There's bills moving forward to pay school districts back for transportation reimbursements during the summer and when they were doing the food transportations to different locations. So that one is moving forward. But we'll probably get a better result by the time the TASB conference comes around. We'll have a better idea of the damage being done. Is there any questions? Are there any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Abel? As I said, consider the source before you answer the question. Thanks, Abel.
Thank
Been
you.
following you really close. Chief,
Good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and members of the Board of Education. The District Police Activity Report begins on page 324 in the agenda, and it's there for your review, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
anyone have any questions for Chief? Thank you, Chief. Which moves us to Ms. DeWalt.
Mr. Board President, Dr. Goffney, and board members, my agenda begins on page 329, and it involves the release of judgment liens on cases where the taxes have been collected, the attorney's fees have been gathered, and all court costs. I will answer any questions if you have them.
Standard report. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. That ends my agenda.
Thank you. We will adjourn into executive session under section 551071, consultation with attorney, section 551074, personnel matters, section 551072, real estate, section 551076, security personnel or devices, and section 551082, student disciplinary matter, if we have any, under the Open Meetings Act. It is now 8:41. And we will move into an executive session. We'll give everybody about 10 minutes. If everybody will come back for executive session about 8:52.